for the Naiji, laziness and bad memory have a lot often to do with, say, Z and Bai, which are our furthest powers. So there's often a rather 49-51 nature to it, in that it's very difficult to get to, so we don't tend to want to do it. But when we do it, there's often an extreme fetishy nature to it. So this brings up again one of the many very complex dichotomies about Naiji, is that there can be an extreme reluctance of the psyche to hold any information that for some reason doesn't want to work on. But what it does want to work on, it can OCD on, and in that it'll actually have like prodigious memory accuracy or fanatic energy to do work. But otherwise, both the physical body and the metaphysical resources, like the memory, for example, will not be available. So this often makes people have strong opinions about the Naiji being in one state versus another. You may see a Naiji in one state, they seem very lazy and they can't remember everything. In another state, they may seem like superhumanly galvanized and they're rattling off information like they must have that shit memorized in a book in their head. But neither of which is true. It's really the total of both experiences, with the fetish experience being the least frequent, the less frequent. So it's very hard basically to move the mind or body when the simulator, the synonymy, or the spirit forms are not actively engaged in some sort of case that interests them. Naiji who do fetish can run into this, even if they fetish onto something that they like. But it tends to be better if they're fetishing on something that is good and that is noble. And this gets more accentuated the less so, and that is the quality of being like an obnoxious uber hard ass. So Naiji, often, if you were to call them, would you see yourself as lazy or having a bad memory, a lot of Naiji would have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, and in fact they would have a very adamant opinion to the contrary, because they associate themselves with their memory on certain ritualistic things and their laziness or energy on their fanatical outputs. Other Naiji are actually the opposite. They're actually unaware that they actually have sort of savant-like OCD memory that can be used, and they have not experienced maybe that many or any fanatical outpourings of energy, a frenzied fanatic style. So they're actually unaware they possess that, and they very strongly are like, I'm just lazy and I don't remember things, and they don't really realize that both these are one and the same phenomenon. What else? Basically, in a nutshell, Nai's one of the major issues is Nai gets no credit. And Nai with Ji often gets sometimes no credit too. Nai is always thinking and has a very long sort of pondering cycle. During that period, the body is almost inert. You can have Nai and still be moving your body, but the most powerful use of Nai, you detach as much as you can from the physical body. Think like, sensory deprivation chamber. So sensory deprivation chambers are generally regarded as relaxation, or a way to enhance or stimulate the mind, or it's sort of seen as therapeutic. Not that you're working. And actually for a Naiji, that's what's actually happening. When they're actually pondering, doing thought experiments, as Einstein would say, they're actually crunching major calories. In fact, Naiji often, as a count of this, have hot body temperatures. They run hot. They prefer to actually be in cooler environments to keep their house cool, because they feel overheated a lot. That's actually the brain going that powerful, that fast. Sometimes it'll actually burn out literally a tremendous amount of calories through nervous energy. There's a nervousness of the HSP. There's also just the activity of the mind. So that is a quality. So when the Nai is doing this, pretty much it only gets credit once it comes to the end of its cycle and starts moving into Ji and then really over to Zai and V. And so, for example, Einstein, Naiji, when he's doing his thought experiments, he's only allowed to call them that because he came up with the theory of relativity. If he had not done that and published his work and actually became known for that, he would have just been a dude on a couch. There are lots of guys that actually spend a lot of time doing that, but unless they actually are able to publish or get known for the fruits of all that mind, weightlifting, they get no credit. So it's kind of like you were loafing. There's a lot of like you were loafing or you were obsessing about something unimportant. So either you were doing nothing or you were just obsessing on unimportant things until it arrived at something that can actually help out the tribe. But the tribe needs to understand that that's the way Naiji work, and it will eventually lead to something that will help everyone out if it's recognized. If the Naiji must put forth efforts that demonstrate the effort it's doing with its Nai before the Nai has completed its task, it will be an inferior product. But that's only because it was being called for before it's done baking. So Naiji have to deal a lot with not having the baking process of an idea being given any credit, and then being asked to bring out partially baked ideas, which makes them look not so good. So daydreaming, for lack of a better word, is the source power of the Naiji actually activating. So this can seem like, are we supposed to have a tribe where we actually deal with Naiji daydreaming all the time? We're supposed to give them props for that. Well, obviously there are levels of daydreaming, but if you were to take, for example, the think tanks that are out there, the greatest think tanks in the land, you say you got some Naiji in these temples, they're doing these think tankings, and they are educated, they are trained, they are heroic, they are peaking, they're highly developed. So this means that they do have Ji, very well developed. Maybe they actually have a lot of Zai and a lot of V, so they have trained those, so that their daydreaming is more sophisticated. That's the purpose. Still, the daydreaming or thought experiments maybe gets upgraded from daydreaming to thought experiments once you've trained your other functions enough, your other powers, but still, that daydreaming, that visioning should occupy a majority of the workday. If you divide the workday up into hours, the Nai pondering should be over half of it. Over half the time should be spent staring out into space, or something else of the like, which most people would instantly think is lazy. That's just so presumptuous. But that is actually what Naiji need to do. And if they are not allowed to do that, they'll either suffer, or they'll be forced to actually do it in private. They'll have to pretend like they're doing more animated kind of work to make people impressed with them, and then go off on their own and allow their brain to do what it needs to do, which is long percolating, long pondering, Okay, let's see. And then the next part, which also contributes to laziness, is the ranking. After the Nai, the conscious ranking is Ji, and the energetic ranking is Ni. Both these also contribute sometimes to a feeling that Naiji are lazy, because Naiji are going to want to, once the Nai has shown them stuff, they're going to want to talk a lot. They're going to have a lot of high conversations, Ni and Ji, about what's on their mind. They're going to want to actually experiment and do abstractions and brainstormings on what they were pondering, and then also talk to close friends and colleagues and trusted people on maybe how those ideas could be enacted, what's maybe feasible. That will occupy another large chunk of the day. So for Naiji, a lot of the times we thought just thinking in their simulator, and then kind of thought experiments with their Ni and conversations with their friends. That's the next majority portion. In fact, it may be that occupies several days in a week, with the Zing up and Ving detailing that kind of stuff actually only happening maybe in the last day or so. And that would actually be a very normal cycle. And if it's done that way, Naiji actually are very good at actually producing a phenomenal amount of very logically tight and detailed, spot-on information, high quality, in a short amount of time. If they're allowed to do this other thing, they need to let their mind wander, they need to have conversations with friends, and they need to actually play, sort of like imaginative games with their other. That's actually a requirement, or they won't get to the stuff people want. So that's actually crucial. So, Naiji can sometimes actually be lazy because there's such a disconnect from that way of being to the actual fruition that they just think it's not there, and they're often told by the environment that there is no connection, that these thoughts that you're having in your mind and these geeking out conversations you're having with your friends and these me-induced excursions to remote bookstores for comics or whatnot, these aren't getting you anywhere. They are distractions from perhaps schoolwork or some other kind of thing. But for an IG, that's going to make them genius at those things and give them the energy to do them. Without them, they will actually not be as smart and would not as motivated. And that's the important, intelligence and motivation. Next, an IG do need to be demanded of them that they perform. Otherwise, they can actually just stay in the simulator and never come out. That is a danger, and that would be lazy. But the environment needs to understand the cycle of production. All the different mojos are like different kinds of production cells, production houses. The IG production house has a volcano as sort of like a metaphor for its cycle, which is long periods of gestating, but gestating these massively powerful forces that literally remake the earth, and then they erupt. So it is a making that a conducive process and timing of it to be ideal. That's actually how you work with an IG. The tribe, the system, the community, the bubble is not treating that production source correctly if it doesn't actually allow it to erupt periodically. So there needs to be the long period of percolation and then extreme venues for eruption. Both are actually required. If not, then IG runs the risk of being seen as a lazy loafer who's going nowhere, or a violently volatile, eccentric person. But in reality, you combine the two and you actually have a very beautiful product the natural law puts out, and puts it out through the IG. What else? On that percolation of the volcano thing, you had to kind of give like a weather kind of metaphor quality, because although IG are directive, a lot of people, when they think directive, they tend to instantly think, whether they know it or not, Z and Vi. They tend to think being very on point, very specific, being let's go here, and often very much on timetables. Z is heavily associated with being directive, but IG are extremely directive, but they don't have either of those two powers in their conscious hierarchy. It's very, very low, actually. So IG basically go on the schedule of volcano eruptions, not on any other schedule. So IG will often balk at actually being put on any other schedule. In fact, if there is the attempt to do that, then IG will just shut down often and then erupt off stage, off the clock, because they need to erupt, and often there is IG almost ghosting through their day jobs or whatever else they're doing in their life to kind of get by, and then they actually have the most intense moments of them erupting into things that they usually call like their hobby, their eccentricity, their side project, but that's actually what is supposed to be the majority of what they're getting recognized for and being aided in bringing to fruition. IG can work on group schedules, but it has to do more with G, and again, being IG, it'll have to do a lot to do with, say, wolf packs or Nages or other close alchemies, so where it's a wolf pack or a life crew. In this way, you can have, menstrual cycles, breathing rhythms, heart rates. There's lots of things that actually can kind of get in rhythm if there's an incredible closeness. And this is not a bad thing. It can actually be a very, very healthy thing that shows a tremendous deep unity among a people. So for the IG, they can get into synchronized eruptions with a group of people. But it will be that, like, for example, like a group of, say, IG Wolfpack who are going to go be artists, they perform on stage. They'll naturally, sort of, the group will have a group percolation period, and then a group sort of ranting, getting fired up to go out and do something, and then a group eruption on stage, and then a group refractory period. And so you can get a group, but it'll usually only be a very, very few people, and still it'll be a people-based artistic timing, not a time that would ever go on a clock. And generally speaking, most IG know what I'm talking about. If you don't do the assigned classwork, or you don't do your work on the clock upon demand, you're often seen as lazy. Like if you don't feel like working from the hours of 2 to 4, but then you go home and you feel like working on some project in your room, like reorganizing your comics, that actually is quite daunting and it requires a great amount of energy, and you do that gleefully for like 12, 15, 20 hours. So you're like, I do stuff, I just don't seem to be able to do stuff upon, and that's very Z. Z wants you to do such and such amount of work at 8 a.m. to this time, but Naiji just doesn't work that way. It just simply doesn't. And so if it tries to, it'll fail, and then it will get a score that really isn't commiserate with what's going on, but only because it doesn't understand itself. Going along with that is repetition. Naiji generally loathe repetition, so a Naiji that is researching something or trying to solve a case can often go for like days, like they're inhuman, but it has to have interest to their simulator, their phenomena, their spirit forms. If not, there'll be no energy to do it. So they actually go in, they're actually like saying they're adding a nub to widget A to transform it into widget B. And they do that all day long, just adding nubs to widget A to turn widget A's into widget B's. Okay, they may actually literally fall over from exhaustion after 40 minutes. So literally, it would take actually, that's why Naiji have great willpowers, because most Naiji are forced to do shit like that. Like Naiji actually like washing dishes for an hour, that might as well be like a week's worth of work. It's so arduous. Unless they're into it for some reason. Then they can actually do it and not even think about it. If Naiji's in a certain mood, they can wash dishes for an hour and literally have no memory they even did that. Those be visioning and having a good time, so it depends on how the tsunami is taking it. Generally speaking, the powers that be, ZVI, don't like that way of operating. It's generally considered lazy, and even if you're noted for being very impressive, so you're not technically lazy, they usually put you over into eccentric / prima donna. Because why can't you just work at these hours? Why can't you just, because we just don't. We just do not work on that schedule. There is a schedule, but it's a natural law, phenomena, what my spirits are up to this week schedule. That's basically it. However, going back to the other thing about why some Naiji are real hard asses, and they can often think that they're like, I'm uber literal, I'm a master of literalness. It's because if they should, hopefully can say, out on something, but often just fetishing and frequently going into frenzies that maybe aren't healthy, is they're actually able to do the OCD savant thing. Whenever Naiji actually go into like fanatic mode on something, automatically they boot up like this OCD savant mode. And then they're able to do certain things. But that doesn't mean it's healthy to do that at all, and certainly doesn't mean it's healthy to actually expect everyone else to do it. And most Naiji just do this instinctually. It's an energetic thing. Even though they don't maybe realize how daunting life is for them energetically and how much they have to do like willpower checks on a constant basis, they are. And so they actually expect everyone else to do this too, especially if they've had it hard on them. So like, it's sort of like, I had an OCD savant, you know, fanatic psycho on this, so you do too. And so it's very important that Naiji and the tribe and system at large become aware of this process of how the Naiji power cell works in order that everyone gets what they want and the maximum productive harmony is achieved.